2 years ago, effectively, if you will, at 3:45, exactly 100 years after the first flight made it from England to Australia. And Mike is private pilot, VFR, believe it or not. And the new aircraft, of course, is called the Southern Sun 2. The original Southern Sun was its first aircraft, a civil amphibian, which Mike flew to the. Well, you used the word, Mike, but you're a bit of, there was a bit of pressure or duress to continue the flight and continue around the world. But we won't dig too deep in that. Anyway, by doing that, he certainly achieved an Australian record and a world record, in my opinion. And I'm somewhat disappointed in some ways. The Americans didn't really follow up on publicity for that. Being American, it would have been literally on the front page of Times and all the American papers as well. But we don't seem to have a huge amount of publicity when it becomes a foreigner, someone from overseas, to they do something noteworthy. In this case, Mike flying a zero around the world, American built airplane, but not a huge using that publicity, certainly not in the areas that I look at. So, go from there. Anyway, Mike is going to talk tonight about his flight from the UK, his new aircraft, the Sea Bear, and most unusual looking twin, high wing, and I love the rear access door, if you will, behind the cabin, and it's got a big tail to it. And it's a tail dragger, let's move on. So without further ado, let me just welcome Mr. Mike Smith. Mike, going forward.
Thank you.
Mike, good to see you here.
It's great to be here.
And still got the suntan from 2 years ago coming.
This is working on the farm. My life's changed in many ways over 2 years.
I'll hand the microphone to you.
He doesn't need that. So I don't need this one. So
No,
I'll pop that one there. Have it on the lapel. And g'day, folks. It's great to be here. Now, can everyone hear me? I feel you can hear okay. Right. Now, let me just get. Now, while I've got the whole screen here, Tom Lockley, where are you? Hi, mate.
G'day, I'm here.
Jolly good to see you.
Yeah, well, I've got some stuff for you shortly too, so anyway, we'll be in touch.
Explain shortly.
Looking forward to today.
Tom and I spent some time in the plane, but that's at the end of the story, not the beginning. So, but yeah, great to see you up there. Now,
thank you.
Can we get my iPad on the screen, please? Those interstate, just stand by while the AV people do their thing. The people in Sydney, we're about to lose you on the screen. Yeah, you probably have to change the input from the computer to the iPad. So if you're in Sydney or Brisbane, you can pick your nose now. Sorry, wasn't it? Here we go. Like, woohoo!
Ooh, lovely. Can you see?
Okay. Now, if this camera, if you set it up so I'm in the corner and they can see the screen.
Yeah, you're in the corner and you're dark.
But that's probably okay. You don't really need to see me, do you?
Silhouette. That's all right. Great effect.
It's okay. I think as long as you can hear me and you can see the pictures. Okay, so it's great to be here again. Of course, I spoke a few years ago about that trip I did. And Dave makes the point that, and he and a lot of people have said, gee, there just wasn't enough media coverage of that trip that you did. But look, that's partly of my own doing. We never issued a press release. We didn't go looking for media attention. You know, I kind of approached it as a holiday. And so when my parents got in the caravan to go around Australia 30 years ago, they didn't issue a press release, and I didn't see the need to do the same. You know, and at the time I didn't know I was going to break records and do all those things, but you know, I was still pretty proud for it. Now, so yeah, we'll bring up just quickly. Has everyone actually heard the story of going around the world? I'm not going to tell it again tonight, but I think you've all heard it. So this is the trip that I did amazing, life-changing event in my life. I absolutely loved it. And this is the little bird that I did in the sea ray. It is tiny. My son and his girlfriend were recently given a smart car. You know those tiny little smart cars? I sat in it and I thought, this is bigger than the sea ray. I've got it made. And look, at the end of that trip, I did a lot of thinking about I really love that trip, but whereas my wife encouraged me to keep going around the world thinking I'd get it out of my system and that would be the end of it, especially when you get told that you're the adventurer of the year, you kind of find yourself wanting to do more. And I started thinking, well, what is it? I think I'm on borrowed time, spending doing 19-hour ocean crossings in a single engine. I'm sure Dave. So, I made a list of, I thought, if I'm going to do more of these adventures, what is it I need to do? And so I made this list. I need to get my IFR rating. I can say I'm halfway through that. But in fact, it was going really well, and then there was a plague. Needed more range than what I had, more redundancy. Turns out not only was it a single engine, but the plane really had a lot of single points of failure that really didn't make it ideal. I would really like a diesel engine so that you get jet fuel at the airports. I would like 4 seats. I think cross-country planes should fly at 120 knots minimum, and 120 is kind of nice. It's 2 miles a minute. It's really easy to work things out. I'd like to be able to sleep in the plane. I did sleep in the Sea Ray, but it was really uncomfortable. So I thought I'd really like a plane that has time for a bed and more time. So I think, I'm a cinema guy, so I like to always come back to a movie reference. Now let's see if I get that other microphone, just exactly as it is. Turn it on, right?
Turn it on. Yep.
I'll use this a couple of times. So let's see if this works. You ready? Can't hear it, can you? So what is it he says? Everyone knows what he says. I'm going to need a bigger boat. And what I thought was, I'm going to have to work on that audio. The perfect boat, if you could afford it and keep it flying, would be a Catalina. What a magnificent aircraft. And this is a photo that I took when I was in Iceland, where I landed and there just happened to be a Catalina there, and I parked under the wing, which, kind of mother goose. But it's actually amazing how similar the lines are on those planes. Like, look at that nose. They're really quite similar. And I thought, what I really want is a scale model of a Catalina. And I went looking for one. I actually met engineers, and I was trying to actually commission someone to make me a half-size Catalina. That went nowhere. But there you go. I kept running into Catalinas. And as I think I told this group before, my grandfather served on Catalinas. And so, they've had a long association and awareness of them. And to cut a long story short, what I came across was this plane in Russia. And once I saw a picture of this, I got really interested. Now that's the little seat, that's the L44. It's the smaller version of what I ended up getting, because what I got actually didn't exist at the time. But I was so intrigued with this plane and how it kind of looked like a little Catalina, and I'd seen some videos on YouTube of it flying, and I really wanted to know more, but at the time their website was only in Russian, so I did the only thing that made sense. I bought myself a ticket on Qantas and I went to Russia and I went to have a look at it, and when I got there I fell in love with it. Look, Dave's mentioned that door a couple of times. So they decided to call the plane a Seabed. Now, I think they made that decision somewhere between me getting on that flight at Tullamarine and actually landing in Russia, because when I left, it was called an L44 or an L45. In fact, it was called the Chaika L44 or L45. I had this one with a bear painted on the tail, and I think because I went around the world in a Sea Ray, they decided it should be a Seabed. And I really think it's that simple. But we, with one of the other planes, went flying, and this is one of the great features of this plane. As you taxi into the beach, you just put in the outside engine, turn the tail around, plop it on the beach, open the door, walk off the back, and you can just wear your street shoes. Now, especially, you know, when you're in your tuxedo and you've got your good black shoes on with those leather soles, I mean, you don't want to step in the water. So a single, and bizarrely, a single rope, you can just see here, this little, like handholds at the back. You tie a single rope up to a tree and the plane just sits there. It just kind of kicks around, and once one of the floats hits the shore, it just doesn't go any further. So I was taken. Now this is Lake Baikal, the largest freshwater lake in the world over in the eastern part of the country. So we got around and did some great things. Plenty of room to sleep in the back. So I was feeling pretty good. Okay, black means there's a video. I can't remember. Oh, and we went for a fly. Oh, no music. This is going to kill me. Oh, I know where it is. Hold on. Yeah, it's coming out. It's good.
Coming out of here.
I can hear it. Yeah, that's big. Which one? That one?
No,
The back of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
exit.
Yeah.
That's the speaker, yeah.
It's not what it is.
I'll hold it there.
Give us the speaker, give us the microphone.
Yeah, we'll try that. If that works. Geez, I love doing our own AV. Okay, things gone kaput. Let's do that again. Ready? Definitely hear it. Yeah, it's not quite working, is it? Where's the remote for this? There's a remote. Oh, you know what? They'll be able to hear it at the other end. We just can't hear it here because the mic's up there. You know what we can do? If you plug that Bose speaker into that audio out.
Okay.
I didn't do my own AV.
Were you on board this?
Yeah. I'm
The camera. You're the camera.
I'm in the right seat. This is the he's flying.
No, we need.
No, it's not.
No, there's not one. I'm quite right.
It's screwed.
Yeah.
Oh, we can't. We can't do it.
Yeah, I know. Check it out. Oh, this was the most magnificent. Oh, hold on.
Yeah, that's full.
Yeah.
It's disappointing.
Oh, sorry, gang. Anyway, that's just some James Bond music. It probably doesn't matter. This is Samara. Yeah, so sorry. So Samara is on the Bulga River. One of the interesting things about why these flying boats are even existing is, I mean, in this one town of Samara, I visited three factories that are all making flying boats, and apparently I missed a couple. When general aviation, what you missed there was we landed on the snow.
No, it's all right.
We wheels up
Yeah.
on the hull.
Yeah.
Magnificent.
Yeah.
He was showing off, I have to say. But we when general aviation opened up, post perestroika, they were allowed to have aeroplanes, but they didn't have access to many runways. So they built planes that could, so hydro aviation just exploded in the middle of the country. So jump forward a couple of years, because it did take a while to get the plane built. And it went from being that little four-seater with a pair of 914 115 horsepower engines, and it grew into this six-seater. We talked about, gee, if it was just a bit longer and if it was just a bit this and just a bit that. And they basically stretched the plane in the mold and did a few things and went for the new Rotax 915 engine, which is 145 horse, turbocharged, fuel injected, magnificent step forward for Rotax in their engines. And what do you do when you get a new boat? Christening. And again, no audio, but I don't speak Russian anyway. But it was just lovely that they had this. So this is the first day that she's going to fly in October 2019. So this little runway is 430 meters long, and there are 430 meter long runways all over Russia because they were the Antonov AN2 runways, and they're basically the milk run runways. And so a lot of them have now got, they've become private airstrips. This one has the factory where a number of planes get built. So that was its first flight. Felt pretty good. And look what's in the background. Yeah. And the funny thing about going, so when you're flying across Russia, you just see these runways everywhere. And so they make sure all these planes have short field capability so they can use these runways. This happily takes off in 250 meters, lands in about the same, both land and water. Just a phenomenal thing for a twin-engine plane that can take 6 people. The winds can take 12 hours of fuel, and I have plumbed in connection points in the cabin and have made some bags that let me put up to, I haven't quite tested it yet, but if I told you my aim was 32 hours, you probably know what aircraft I want to make. Right, that's going to be the subject of a future talk. Right, here we go. 1919, first flight from England to Australia. So the 100th anniversary is coming up. I've got this plane ready to pick up, and it just seems a crying shame that nothing's happening to mark the 100th anniversary of this incredibly, incredibly important event. I mean, everyone's heard of Dick Smith. Nearly everyone knows about Sir Kingston Smith, but very few people today know about Keith and Ross Smith, the Ross brothers. Sorry, the Smith brothers, who flew the Vickers Vimy out. Now, aviation people know, but they're certainly not household names. And, there was talk, in fact, Dick Smith offered $1 million prize money for to have an electric race from London to Australia. Most people have heard that. And, but basically couldn't get the approvals for it to go ahead. And it was probably a good thing because I don't think there were any planes that actually could have made it anyway. So, I think if I hit this button again, you'll see the original route. Here we go. Oh yeah, in fact, this shows the route I took, which is following the original route, and where I had to deviate. So I was able to very closely follow the route they took, except through the Middle East. Iraq, Iran, and Syria wouldn't give me landing permission. Very glad, but at the time I was disappointed. And slight deviation through there, but that it took them 4 weeks to do it. In fact, so we all remember Billy Hughes put up the prize. They had 30 days to do it. They did it in 20 days. So I was planning to take the same 28 days. You'll remember from my last trip that the big problem I had getting across the Pacific was I couldn't get permission to get into Russia. Well, this time I couldn't get out. So just classic Russia. I was all ready to leave, and this is the first time this factory's exported a plane. So I can't blame them for not understanding the export rules very well. And just as we thought we're about to leave, Dimitri was told that I needed to provide a letter from the Ministry of Defence confirming that my plane had no military value in order to leave. And they said that would take 2 months to get that letter. Now, I don't want to know what took place. 2 weeks later, I had the letter. It did mean I left Russia a week late. But I stayed out of those negotiations, let's just say, and I don't know what cash and vodka. I was quite taken with the historic nature of this trip. So the plan was to fly from Samara, which if I use my base plan, because that's why I have one. Samara's up here somewhere, roughly. Oh no, in fact, blah, 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 blah. Bang, it's up in here. So I flew over to London, took me a few days, and then planned this trip. My research led me to this. The 1919 flight, people have said it was the moon landing of its era. And I think to highlight this, an entire National Geographic magazine was dedicated to this trip. Now today, when you pick up Nat Geo or Ausgeo, what you might have 20 different articles in there, maybe 3 main features. It was such a big deal that this magazine featured the whole thing. Now, they're post-it notes down the side because I use this as my primary Bible the article was actually taken from Sir Ross Smith's book. So it was just a slightly abridged version of it, but very, very detailed and some fantastic photos. So I used that book to help me plan the trip. And I was able to find 2 copies of the magazine for sale. So one I kept in pristine condition, and the lesser quality copy I went through and post-it noted and highlighted and marked it up so I could follow it. But I love when I'm going on a trip to have these historic excuses for flying, because it kind of gives you a guiding compass, gives you a thing to follow. And I set myself the task that I would try to retake as many of the black and white photos that were in this article, this magazine, along the way. And these are the 2 engineers. Now, I know their names, but who here? Bennett and Shears, well done. So this was my first attempt. This is Dimitri and the engineer from the factory. And I'm doing this, and they don't speak English, but I'm showing them the photo, and I've put the ladder in front of the plane, and I'm pushing them and gesturing them, and eventually they did it. But I love that he wore his Russian. Just fantastic guys. I got myself to London, stayed the night, and I kind of had to skedoodle. It was amazing how, we all talk about climate change, but I found the weather almost to the day was the same on this trip. When they left London, there was snow on the ground, and it was snowing when I landed in London and when I left. The grass field that they left from something. Thank you. Is just near Heathrow, but is now parkland, and I couldn't land there. But I found a White Orphan airfield very close by, which had grass fields and a lovely club there. And as I left there, the first thing that had changed, one of the things that highlighted how things have changed is that when the original flight happened, there was no air traffic control. There weren't charts, there were road atlases. There was no airways. There was no controlled airspace. So when they wanted to fly over Tower Bridge and London Bridge and take photos flying down the Thames, they could do it. I couldn't redo any of those photos because of controlled airspace. But I did manage, as I crossed the beach down at Felixstowe, this photo of the old hotel on the foreshore, I was able to find and thought I did a pretty, oh God, I must update. This is really pixelated, but you can see that I absolutely found the same thing. It's been expanded a little bit, but the harbour's even there at the end. So I thought this is going pretty well. I didn't get a whole lot more along the way because of controlled airspace, because most of the interesting things they were taking photos of were over the cities, and I just couldn't get anywhere near them. But then I got to Egypt. So I worked my way down through France and Italy, had almost the same weather. They weren't planning to land in Pisa. They were flying for Rome. I was doing the same thing, flying for Rome. Rome was shut down due to VFR because of traffic. I had to divert to Pisa. Exactly the same thing that happened to them. Just quite amazing. Anyway, found my way down to Egypt. I was pretty excited about this. I hadn't been to Egypt before. And but the lowest altitude that VFR aircraft are allowed to fly across Egypt is 8,500 feet. So there was no taking photos of anything. So I did this one from the ground, and I kind of got close. I couldn't quite get to where they would have been sitting. I've chopped half that photo off anyway by the looks of it. So, but it was pretty exciting to be there. Now, I said I couldn't go to Syria, but the guys actually flew on their way to Syria. They didn't land in Jerusalem, but they did fly over it. And I was pretty keen to try to do that. So I've been to Israel before and was very, very pleased that with open arms, I was welcomed, given permission to fly back to Israel. It's very, very hard to get, but I had some good people on the ground. And, they say the best laid plans. I put in a plan to fly. Now, no one can read that, of course, but this was my flight plan to go from Egypt to Israel, because officially you can do that, officially. But I put in a flight plan and they came back an hour later and said, no, we don't like that route. So talking to my ground handler, well, not quite working out what's going on. He said, just put in another route. So I put in another route. No, we don't like it. No, don't like it. That went all day. So I'm meant to leave, you know, I've got up super early, meant to be in the air by 7 a.m. By about 3 o'clock, I thought, yeah, this isn't happening. And, you know, I had some daylight restrictions and things, obviously. So the only route that they were prepared to give me was if I flew via, what's the island out there? Cyprus. If I flew up and landed flew out over Cyprus and then back in, they would let me do that. But I didn't have enough fuel on board. And while I could have added more, I was, oh no, I couldn't have added more because they don't have any F-gas in Egypt. So I'd arrived with enough to go direct, but not to be diverted. So I really had a problem on my hands. They, however, said, basically I was told, you're going to have to go via Jordan. And I was able to, luckily, very quickly get permission overnight to go via Jordan. And so the next morning I landed at Jordan and was on the ground for 45 minutes, didn't even leave the building. I'd already checked they had some fuel there, topped up and kept going. Now, when I got to Egypt, I was really in for a treat. There's a really strong recreational aviation community in Israel, lots and lots and lots of LSA planes, partly because there are so many ex-military people who, you know, they go and do their 3 years of service and then they want to go flying. So I actually gave a talk for them that night to a massive, massive crowd of people. And their surprise for me was they had arranged clearance to fly an Australian registered plane and do a lap of Israel and fly all over the country. This is such a rare privilege. Now, they're also quite clever because I had to have an Israeli navigator on board. So I had a full plane of people. We actually had other Israeli planes in flying with us, and off we went. And I have to say that the audio for this just doesn't matter. It's just engine noise. But we flew down, this is to the Sea of Galilee, somewhere I wasn't allowed to go on my first round the world trip. And, you know, this is where Qantas landed to refuel back in 1939. And this is the Dead Sea. We're actually at reasonable elevation here. There's all this footage because one of the other guys was filming us. King Herod's temple on top of the mountain, the Masada. And then down, and then this is flying over Jerusalem. I mean, over Jerusalem. There's, I've got this photo coming up again in a sec. But I just felt so privileged to go on that flight that day. It's amazing how Jerusalem's hardly changed in 100 years. And that minus 1,200 feet was our altitude landing down on the Dead Sea. Incredible. I don't know if you noticed, but what did it say? It said the airspeed was something like 800 knots because the computer couldn't cope with the fact that it was so low. So there it is, the old photo of Jerusalem and Jerusalem today. Now, obviously, there's been a lot of building around it, but you know, the old walls there, the temples there, it really hasn't changed. It's quite incredible. And you know, even walking around the streets in the old Arab district, this photo was taken, and with my ground handler, who I'd given this task to help me find these things, where, you know, riding around on a motorbike around town, we managed to find that too. So, and you can see, look, I enjoy flying, but I love traveling. So having these things to do at night, and you know, when I actually, this trip I flew 2 days out of 3, so I didn't have a lot of time for looking around, but normally you're on the ground by mid-afternoon, so I just make absolutely the most of the time that I had. So from Israel, I went, that's where I basically just made a beeline over towards Pakistan with a technical stop for fuel, and then rejoined Pakistan, the original route. I love flying through India. It's always entertaining. And, but I was a little bit disappointed in myself because I did have a bit of time pressure, and it's because I'd set myself this task, this goal. If I wanted to land in Darwin, as Dave said, 100 years to the minute from when the Vickers Vimy landed. So while I would love to have taken my time and looked around, I was really just pushing through. I still had time to have a little look around. I spent a day in Delhi, which I haven't done for many, many years, and I had a day off in Bangkok, where the next photo comes in. Now, they took this photo in Bangkok. What do you think the chances of finding 3 girls dressed up like this would be? I gave it no hope. So little hope, I wasn't even looking for it until I was at the ferry terminal. Now, the main difference
They've all got phones.
is their phones. Like all of the young people today, they were lost in their phones. But yeah, I couldn't believe my life. So the flying, on average, I was doing roughly 8-hour days, 9-hour days. The plane went really well. Nearly every day through Asia and the Middle East, we're flying at 10,000 feet. From Egypt to Jordan, actually they were doing, I think El Bastados would be the right Spanish term. They were trying to send me up to 18,000 feet. I didn't have oxygen on board. So I must say I was actually getting quite anxious because it was an hour into the flight, they were telling me to climb. And I knew that, and I was saying, I was unable. And so they started saying, you need to return to Cairo. And like, if you can't do it, you have to come back to Cairo. And I knew then I was in trouble because there was no more fuel in Cairo for me. So I pleaded with them that I didn't have oxygen and something else. And it was interesting that another pilot from a commercial flight came on the radio and spoke to air traffic control in another language. And then at the end of it, it was okay. So I took that to fix it. But I was really worried that, it's kind of not it's not the area you want to be disobeying the rules. But they definitely got stroppy with me. And I ended up at 14,000 feet with oxygen, and I don't really like doing that. Like, in America, it's 12.5, and I must admit, I've done 13 plenty of times. But once I was nudging 14.5, I thought, I don't want to do that. So, I always look to Dave for kind of that nod because I look up to him so much. So, no, I really do.
Mike, I'm taking your notes to pay.
Yeah, no, please do. I now have oxygen in the plane, by the way. I should have done it before, just didn't occur to me. So refueling, I was able to do about just over, no, in fact, I did 2/3 of the trip with car petrol. Again, the thing I love about this aeroplane is it uses car petrol, which is a fraction of the price, better for the engine, better for the environment, if you can even call any burning of gasoline good for the environment, but better than that gas. Where I did have to get it, generally it was reasonably efficient. Normally, you might wait for a few hours, but usually it was sort of 30 to 60 minutes to get it all sorted. Is this a video? Oh yeah, I don't know why I did a video of this. Maybe it's interesting. Oh, just looking around. Yeah, it's always intimidating when you're surrounded by such heavy men. Just bizarre. So but I was lucky. I really pushed it. Having done it in the Sea Ray a few years earlier, I'd learned that if you push hard enough and send excerpts from the Rotax manual that says that low gas is preferred, that I could actually, with enough notice, get them to bring car petrol for me. And a lot of these parts of the world, our gas is $6 US a litre. And $4 US would be the average. So getting car petrol for sometimes 50 cents, sometimes $1 is worth the effort. I do love, it's just hilarious. Is that a video? So this just kept happening. This was pretty typical. I could or could not be in the plane. It probably doesn't matter. But they're all coming to get their photo taken with the plane because she's such a unique bird that time and time again, like it's probably 42 degrees here. I'm in the plane sweltering, waiting for a takeoff clearance, which always takes a while. But yeah, they'll just come and get a photo. And there were times I've landed in the airport and it felt like the entire airport staff descended on the plane. It would be nothing to have 20 or 30 people standing around. Anyway, so I got down from Bangkok, one leap down to Singapore, and I must say, this is where this new plane was so good compared to the Sea Ray. you know, in easy legs, I was flying twice the distance. I was flying Bangkok direct to Singapore, whereas, you know, in the previous trip, that was, I think I had 3 stops. I got to Singapore and it was doing really well for time. I was planning a day off with a mate who's a Singapore captain. But I landed and looked at the weather, and the great thing, the weather tools we have today, with windy, looking out 10 days ahead going, So this ITCZ I've read all about, the intertropical convergence zone, is looking pretty nasty. Now, I knew this was going to be a problem. If I wanted, and it's the guys dealt with it 100 years earlier, I was going to have to deal with it on this trip. And I knew it was going to be the sticking point of the trip, because potentially I could have got there and there was just no path. What I worked out was the best day to go was probably yesterday, but it was going to just get worse and worse and worse every day. And so I just decided I had to go the next morning. And I must say, it was a pretty hairy flight. I think you'll see here, the lightning will go off, and lightning, you know, planes, that's exciting. Yeah, there you go. It's not obvious in the video, but that was really close. But it was amazing how confident I felt in this amazing platform, because firstly, the second engine's there. It's incredibly smooth, incredibly comfortable. I mean, the Sea Ray was taxing. I was in that tiny little sea. And flying the Sea Ray is a little bit probably like trying to ride a Harley for 12 hours a day. It was, or a high-revving Japanese bike, maybe. It was very, very exhausting. But I was really very relaxed in the plane. And even in this kind of weather, what I have learned about those sorts of storms is it's very rare. You know, in Melbourne, we get storms where, you know, you're approaching from the north, you're half an hour north of Gisborne, and what you're looking at is this wall of cloud, but there is no, you're just not going to get through it. That's a very typically Southern Australian thing, special. But, you know, when you're flying up in, say, the north of Australia or in this area, generally what you've got is lots and lots and lots of pockets. And so if you followed my tracking that day, I was zigzagging all over the place, but I had plenty of spare fuel. And also, quite frankly, there were lots and lots of options if I had to land. There are islands everywhere. Not that I could land on the water, but rather land on an island.
Have you got autopilot?
This plane has an autopilot.
Okay, cool.
Magnificent, because the Sea Ray didn't. But and I must say, and that's really changed things too, to be able to. And I must say, the way I fly the plane with the autopilot is I have never actually plugged in a flight plan and told the autopilot to follow it. I just use the blue button. I just get in, get up to my altitude where I want to be, and once I'm on course, I just hit the hold button, and it just keeps me going. And if I want to change course, I change the course, and then I hit hold again. I could learn how to do all of that. I'm just not really interested. I just wanted to hold the plane, but it lets me read things. And you know what? Your question will go down in history as one of the best timed questions, because it lets me do things like make espresso while I'm flying. Now, when I said it's comfortable, I mean, life's too short not to have good coffee. So this is an amazing 12-volt espresso machine.
Yeah.
Takes about 2 minutes, and out comes perfect espresso. So you put the water in, it heats up the water, builds up 16 bar of air pressure. No wonder I'm so happy.
Yeah.
Actually, and you know the other thing now, sailors, you heard sailors, right? So one thing a boat has, or any boat in fact, often you've got that area out in the bilge where you keep things. So this plane actually has a larder between the 2 front seats. There's a little lift up hatch. It's about this deep where you keep your food. It's just fantastic. To cut a long story short, I made it to Darwin, to Timor, and then we have a business there, so I spent a couple of days there because I was well and truly on time, and I was made my way down to Darwin. I was so nervous, I left an hour early. Ended up actually, I said it was a nod to the original flight, but I was so early. What I did for the last hour was I put the flaps out. And I flew at 80 knots, which was the speed that Vickers Vinny flew at to finish the flight. They believed me when I said that, and but I was just early. But I did land to the minute on the runway. The military controllers at Darwin were fantastic. And, you know, we nearly didn't do it at the last minute because they had me coming in on a runway where there were apparently all these spectators waiting at the end of the runway to take photos. And I was being vectored around to land on this runway, and then lightning hit the end of the runway. I said, we're probably just going to change runways. But, you know, the other, I mean, what is it, a mile back to the other runway? Anyway, quickly diverted and still managed to the minute to touch down on that runway. And then was so chuffed to, I didn't know any of this was happening. You know, I'd promised that the Darwin authorities that I'd do my best to arrive, and they had a big shindig on. So I arrived, and they had the water cannons for me. I mean, that's just about the greatest honour I think any pilot can have. So I flew under that, taxied under that, and was then really thankful. What happens when you go underwater? The windscreen gets wet. What happens in a plane with a windscreen normally when it's really wet? You can't see because you need airflow to get rid of the water. But the Russians put a windscreen wiper on the plane. The only plane I've ever seen with a windscreen wiper. So I then went and did my customs and immigration. And so even though I was on time, they made me sit in the plane for ages because there was lightning. Customs and immigration wouldn't come out to me. But finally that got cleared. And then a part of the trip I haven't talked about yet, I was met, there's a lot of people upstairs, but I was met by Australia Post because I had brought the original Vickers Vimy flight. As they were taking off, they were handed a bag of mail and told, if you make it to Darwin, pop this in the post. And along the way, they realised the value of what that mail was going to be, and they ended up getting special stamps made for it, and both a special stamp and a rubber stamp. And yeah, I think he might not have posted it. Was it most of it he kept, and some in Sydney, I think. It certainly wasn't in Darwin, was it? But anyway, so I handed it over to Australia Post in Darwin. They had 362 letters, and I had the same number. And so we made these airmail envelopes, were specially printed for us. We made our own special stamp, which are 364. There it was. They were all numbered, and some are in the hands of collectors today. And because after the trip finished, there was a plague, a lot of it's still in a box at home, which will find their way out into the world. But it was really fun carrying that all the way, and it just going down to the Australia Post, Darwin, Darwin's post office the next day, where they had this team of staff stamping everything with this. They made a special rubber stamp for them just to use that one day. And if you think that was good, what's the thing that no general aviation pilot ever gets to see? Their flight on the arrivals. SS001 from London arrived at 15:45. I must actually frame that and put it up somewhere. So look, I was really lucky that the major events in Darwin had decided they were going to make a big deal about this. They were teaching, it was on the curriculum in the schools. So all of the kids in Darwin know this story, and a lot of people came out. There was a lot of media attention. The government, their equivalent of the governor was there. It was a really lovely event. And you know, when they arrived 100 years ago, it was a monstrous thing. But this photo is not in Darwin; it's actually down in Adelaide. But look at the size of the crowd there. Now, having arrived in Darwin, this is where Tom Lockley comes into the story. Tom has done a lot to do with the history of this trip, but I was keen not just to arrive in Darwin, but to continue, because of course the Smith brothers from Darwin continued all around the East Coast and finished in Adelaide. But while it took them 28 days to get from London to Australia, it took them 3 months to get from Darwin to Adelaide, because everything just started going wrong. They threw propellers, they blew up an engine, they ditched, I won't list all of the things that went wrong, most of you probably know it better than me. But rather than me reenact that part of the trip because I didn't really want to throw a propeller or sleep in the desert. I went home for Christmas, spent time with my family, and Tom and a couple of others, we worked out a route, which was that we'd go back to Darwin with just over a week's time allowed to go from Darwin all the way around back to Adelaide, stopping in all of the same places they did, with town hall talks and coffee stops, talk stops, and a couple of other stops along the way. So that was something we were really looking forward to. Now, when I got to Darwin to start that, there was talk of a cold going around, but no one was wearing masks. And it was interesting that we, when we left the fantastic Aviation Museum in Darwin to begin our trip, there was a lot of talk of it in Melbourne, but up north it was kind of almost like, yeah, we're tough up here. People were insisting on shaking hands. Man's man. We shake hands. The elbow thing hadn't come, and certainly no one was wearing masks. But it was interesting. The further south we got, and the more that this event unravelled, the more that we understood. And unfortunately, some of the talks that were planned started being cancelled, and to the point where by the time I flew over the, which is this is in Adelaide Airport, and the spot where the Vickers Vinny landed all that time ago is now a park, but it was organised to fly over that at the same time they did. That day in Adelaide, I was greeted by a total of 0 people. It was really quite sad, and that was the day that we were advised we had to close our cinemas until further notice, and we really didn't know how long that was going to be. And at the same time, I'm here finishing this trip, which is all of a sudden feeling a bit flippant. I was being sent photos of my staff back at Yarraville, literally boarding up the building because we expected to be closed for the rest of the year. So that was quite sobering. Tom will remember we were lucky that the last couple of days in Adelaide, we had a couple of small gatherings. I did an outdoor talk rather than an indoor for some people. I think it was at Aldinga, Tom. But anyway, oh, there we go. There she is. You don't need to hear what I'm saying because it's exactly everything I've just said. But there is the Vickers Vinny. She, everyone knows she's moving into a new home, don't we? Yeah, so that's really exciting. But it's so awe-inspiring to be standing there right in front of her. But yeah, all lonesome. So that was the end of the trip. I had until 6 o'clock that day to cross the border, or I had to live in Adelaide until further notice. I talk about just making it. Anyway, so yeah, that brought me back home, and look, people often ask me, one of the questions is, what have you done? So I preempted that with, here's what I've done. The cinema had to close, and that was pretty heartbreaking because the Sun Theatre isn't just a normal cinema. It really is the heart of the community there, and we're very proud of the role it plays. But I went and we'd bought a farm a while ago in Little River. So does everyone know where Little River is? Excellent. For the people in Sydney and Brisbane, it's halfway between Melbourne and Geelong, and it's just to the north of Avalon Airport. And so my first, 6 lockdowns, for God's sake. But the first one, our project was we built a solar farm. Now this is about, my wife always says I'm very loyal to the brand. And I figured if we're going to be harvesting the sun, then we should actually build our solar farm in the shape of the sun. So that's obviously the same logo as our Sun Theatre group, our logo. Yes, every solar expert tells me it's not as efficient as it could be, but I say, yeah, but it's cool, and no one's taking photos of other ones. Now, for the last few years on Anzac Day, I have flown usually up to Lake Boga and joined in festivities there in the Sea Ray and flown overhead and then joined them for drinks. Or before that, I would have, while my grandfather was alive, I would have taken him down for the march, maybe pushed his wheelchair. But in 2020, I literally, there was no great plan for this. I was just sitting there that night thinking, well, this is going to be a bit of a dud Anzac Day, isn't it? And I had this idea, and I think now we won't be able to hear this, so I'll have to talk over it. But Channel 7, it got covered by Channel 7 and then Channel 9 News. I decided to do something to mark Anzac Day, which is sort of reminiscent of that solar farm, but it's many people point out that our sun.
The 4-hour flight path, mapping out the rising sun symbol. I had my Anzac cookies packed for sustenance. I used a compass and a stopwatch. I wanted to navigate the way they did in the 1940s. The emblem is worn on the brim of every soldier's slouch hat, including Mr. Smith's grandfather, Flight Lieutenant Russell Smith, who flew in World War II. The second half of the flight was very turbulent, and as I was thinking, oh wow, this is really tough, I wonder if I should keep going, I thought, man up, this is nothing compared to what people in World War II were putting up with. Like so many Australians, Mr. Smith would usually attend dawn service. This year, isolation forced him into the skies. Mr. Smith has owned the custom-made twin-engine aircraft for just 6 months. He admits it's an adventure plane, and he only takes it out on special occasions such as Anzac Day. She can stay airborne for up to 15 hours, and I've flown it out from London last year. I've been on great adventures and many more to come. Tom Chadwick, 7 years.
Excellent. So that whole thing was done OCTA just to make life easier. But yeah, I did use, you know, I mean, on my moving map, I was using the rings as my reference and I was doing it right, but I was determined to calculate the angles and try to do it with the compass. But, you know, to be fair, I was keeping an eye that I was on the right track. But that's why, you know, it's not the perfect symbol, but it was a great day. I think all up that took me something like 4 hours. Yeah. It was around that, I think. Yeah. It was amazing. I got around to Mount Macedon, and I got to tell you, the turbulence was up all like it can be for those who fly. Yeah, gee, it was so violent, and I literally was thinking, I'm not sure this is a good idea, but then I thought, oh, come on. Anyway, so one of the ways I kept flying during lockdown was, I mean, eventually they worked out that pilots should be allowed to fly at least once a month to make sure their planes actually weren't getting damaged by sitting idle. But you were also allowed to fly if work or other reasons meant that it was okay, and including going interstate. So next to our farm is a wildlife sanctuary. So yeah, no, Dave, can't say.
Now you mentioned going interstate. Back in October of 20, I went to Queensland and got tossed down.
Did you try to leave the airport?
I got to the airport and they said the Queensland pilot to do the job. Better in October of 20, I went to Queensland and some work there, and by a bunch of police.
Really?
A bunch of police with big 40 caliber blocks on your hip, and said in effect, if you come here to tell the Queensland pilot to do the same job, we don't want you. So I got put on.
Where do we live? Where do we live? Seriously?
I got put in the Novotel hotel until I could get back to Melbourne, and built for $600 was still to be decided on.
Just appalling. Look, the thing that I had was I was doing day trips return. So what I found out was basically I was working as an unpaid freight pilot. So if you landed at the airport, as long as you didn't leave the airport, you were able to do it. Now I live next door to a 1,000-acre wildlife sanctuary who has a breeding program for native animals, and they just mentioned that they were really struggling to get these animals back to where they were meant to be. And a heap of animals from Canberra actually got airlifted by the RAF back during the bushfires, and they needed to get them back. So I said, look, I will happily do that for you. They were very nice. They covered my fuel costs, but the rest of it was all volunteer, and I was so pleased to be able to do this. And for a while there, I was doing it every week, and you know, like buzzing over to Canberra or down to Bairnsdale, up to Galantapy, some New South Wales ones, but all over the place doing this. And the wallaby, so it was things like bettongs and now some tiny little animals, but also wallabies. The thing with the wallabies is just make sure they don't put their hands on the controls. No, they're actually they're in these backpacks. So this is fascinating. Nothing really flying, but yet the way that they transport them is they put them in a hessian sack upside down, which reminds them of being back in the pouch. So we all love being in the fetal position in bed on a cold morning. And then they put those sacks in the backpacks because it meant that I could then attach them to the seat. And then when they get to the other end, the people returning them to the wild actually put the backpacks on and hike out into the bush and then just release them, which is just fantastic. So I'm still helping with that today. And as I say, something I'm really proud to be doing with them. Now, I don't know. Fourth lockdown, who knows? Who can keep track? I was sick. I was pretty annoyed that we were the only state where there was a point where we're the only ones who weren't allowed to leave our state. I think it was even, when Western Australia wasn't being quite so insane. But I really wanted to go for a flight. The 5 kilometre rule, I think it had been lifted. Yes, it had been lifted. So I thought, I'm going to go on a flight for as far as I can without leaving the state. So what did I do? Followed the border. Now, I have to say, this turned out to be one of my favourite flights I've ever done. It's about 12 hours of flying. And it was just stunning. I mean, there are so many photos I could share with you, but that's not the point of today's talk. But whether it was, I love the 90 Mile Beach and getting out towards Gabo itself. But I've wanted for years and never got around to flying to the source in the Murray, and just one day I actually want to follow it all the way to the mouth. But I thought I'll follow it to the border because I'm not allowed to cross the border. And that was spectacular. I actually did it over 2 days in Yarrawonga for the night. And that dead straight line down the north-south border. It's quite bizarre because there is actually, there's a track to follow all the way. And the countryside, when you're up in this northern part of the state, I've flown over it lots of times, but to actually be following the border, what became really clear was the left-hand side, or the Victorian side, is very green and lush, lots of agriculture and very well tended. And on the right-hand side, it's just like desert. And it really is quite astounding how from one side to the other, it looks uncared for. And it's just because basically we've got a bucket load of irrigation in Victoria, and in New South Wales, it's an area they don't really care about. I suppose they figure they've got plenty of other good quality land to work. But to me, that seemed odd. The most amazing thing I saw was down at Gabo. We saw a whale beaching. Now, it's not the greatest photo, but wow. I didn't need the photo. That was like the 3rd time it did it. I got one snap, but that is an image that I will never, ever, ever forget. See that, and I was at 501 feet above the water. Okay. So what else have I been doing? There's this lovely old shearing shed on that property. Where my props coming. So lovely old shearing shed. This is actually quite an amazing property. It's one of the old Churnside properties. It was the northernmost point of the 90,000 acre farm that they had. And it was in the family until very recently. And so we're now making, I've set up a distillery because by the second lockdown, I knew we needed more alcohol. So we've set up a distillery. It's now a commercial distillery. And here's a shameless plug. We've got 3 brands. One of them is Aviator Spirit, vodka and gin. And the slogan is from the sea to the sky. So I will, well, if anyone wants to taste it, I will open it. And there's a gin as well. But do me a favour, if you're thinking you want some vodka or gin and you want to buy someone a present, go on our website and buy some. It really help us out. Every bottle of vodka or gin funds roughly an hour of flying. Okay. It's amazing what we have to do. The cinemas have been closed for 2 years, and you can sit around and mope about it or just come up with something new. And cinema attendance might be down, but alcohol sales are up, and especially at our house. So it just seemed like a fun thing, and it turns out distilling is quite interesting. So there you go. That's the old trip. We didn't end up making a movie about this one, sorry. Lots of stories, but I don't think I've got time for a book either, so that's probably it for now. And there you go. So Dave will grab that microphone. I'll stand by this one and leave this on so the state people can hear. Can you see me now?
Mike, fantastic second foot, put it mildly, and in the days of 1929, Lindbergh flew from one side to the other, and the American press large forgot about the guys who flew across the Atlantic in 1919, and I just think that the media circus is the word I use. Thanks, Joe. The media circus, unfortunately, hasn't really tapped into your full of adventures in your flights. But I'm, in a lot of ways, I consider myself very privileged to talk to you tonight. You're my Lindbergh of today. Okay.
Thank you.
A couple of quick questions I have for you. Anyway.
Can I say something on that?
Yeah.
So it was interesting. A guy called Rob Lonergan owns the air park up in New South Wales. Yeah, just an emoji. And Ralston, thank you. He took it upon himself. I mean, he was also the importer of sea rays. When I was coming back and coming down through Horn Island, he was trying to get the media interested. I didn't ask him to, but he wanted them to know because he just thought people should know about this. And he said he gave up when one of them said, "Listen, if he crashes, give us a call." I mean,
the best somebody can say there is that airplanes have become more acceptable, if you will, and the media works in strange ways, and there's a bubble of interest in aviation from the 1920s, 1919, which have moved forward, and airplanes are considered almost like a bus. Interstate is up and then the East Coast, it's just like you're getting on a bus, literally.
well, it is when you're in one of those big tubes, yeah. But look, I think just to finish on that, there is some good news out there. You know, the TV media, I think, are hopeless. They're so sensationalized, and they're always, you know, you never trust when you talk to them how they're going to cut the story. But I've had a fantastic run with the radio. I don't know how many people who listen to 3AW, but you know, every few weeks, Darren James rings up and wants to have a chat, and it's always about aviation. His producer wants him to talk about cinema. He wants to talk about planes. So halfway through the chat, I took him flying. I was very strategic. I took him for a lap of Port Phillip over Christmas as his Christmas present from his wife, and which was kind of from me, really. But he and there's a lady at the ABC who has me on every week and always wants to know about, you know, films first, but they always ask about flying. And the message I'm just trying to get across all the time is, you know, the planes cost about the same as a caravan or an expensive, or a big full drive, and it's, you know, it lets me visit my staff more often. It lets me do this, and it's fun. Unashamedly, it's fun, but it's just a fantastic tool, and we need to stop thinking of it as a luxury item. It's an amazing tool. Right. Okay.
Couple of good questions.
Yes.
Your aircraft, this is a technical one. Are you using MS hardware, or is it Russian hardware, nuts and bolts, or what's it made of?
It's all standard AN bolts.
AN.
Yeah. Mainly actually American bolts. There is some Russian stuff in there, but there's nothing wrong with the Russian military.
Right.
I mean, the ladies who have looked in my plane cannot believe the quality of the wiring. It's like something out of it. Beautiful. It's beautiful.
And I noticed looking at the photographs you've just shown us there, you appear to have Garmin 1000 glass screens, but they're not. They're something else.
Yeah, they're actually a South African one called an NGL.
Okay.
which is an experimental one, to be honest. It's because they're half the price. But they do the same job, not as elegantly as the Garmin, but it does the job.
Should go to the end of the day.
Yeah.
And the thing that also intrigued me was that you said you've been flying along at 14,000 feet.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, wow, you didn't not off the wheel at all.
No, but I mean, I was there because I was told to. I certainly wasn't there by choice. I know I've flown at 12 and a half a lot. And I know that just because I've had to. And I know that at 12 and a half, I've never felt dozing. But the trick I was taught by someone is just keep writing and make sure your writing's legible. And if you can't read what you've written, then you've got a problem. So I kept doing that.
Well, my technique is beginning with landing, have a slightly Coca-Cola, get a bit of sugar high, and so they're sparking up on.
No, I do that. That's why I keep the food. And so when I've been on a long flight, and I learned this because what was happening was exactly that. You'd be on this 10-hour flight, of which 98% is dead easy. You come into land. Yeah. So I started making sure that I'd have a piece of fruit like 20 minutes before landing.
That's right.
And it's really helped.
That's it.
Yeah.
The other one was just looking here by my little details there. And on your previous flight, you didn't have any involvement this time around by night flying or IFR flying, but Rod Gunter, your mentor, that's what Zero, he was the chap that said go and get some IFR flying and that you use it to great advantage on your first flight.
I certainly did. Yeah.
This time around, did you have any IFR flying at all? Or
No.
should I say,
No.
reduced visibility of flying?
There was reduced visibility, but there was absolutely, there actually wasn't anything I'd say was full IFR.
And the AP would have helped enormously.
Yeah. It really does. It really reduces the load.
And you talked about the engines, and if I recall correctly,
louder?
Okay. I have a soft voice.
Oh, that's right.
Apologize.
If you face them, I can look at me with your eyes squinting, but talk that one.
Okay. The first time around, you had problems on fueling, but this time around, you had you could get car fuel, probably about 98 octane, or if you really wanted, you could also pick up 100 low lead or similar.
Yes, I could.
Yeah. And you said if you did the whole thing all over again, you prefer to have diesel, in other words, jet A1s, if you could.
Yeah. But yeah, look, so when I found that this plane, literally, it ticked every box except the diesel. So everything else I needed, I could get in this plane. And we tried really hard, but there just isn't a diesel engine that suits this plane. There are some diesel engines around now, but we're talking these road taxis are 80 kilos, and the diesel equivalent is going to be sort of 160, 180 kilos installed. That's a lot of extra weight in a small plane. So we just decided that unfortunately that wouldn't work because it would certainly make life easier.
That's pretty much all the I call the technical questions from me, but there's certainly a lot of space inside. You can make a coffee, stretch out, tap the autopilot, and just watch the clouds roll by. I'm amazed.
She's a great bit of kit. I mean,
how's it fly on one engine?
Really well. So it really does. That plane was originally designed to have a pair of 100 horsepowers. Then they put the pair of 115s. Now it's the pair of 140s. The weight of the plane's only gone up about 100 kilos through that journey. So it really does have plenty of spare power. And to highlight that, one of the things we did at the factory in Russia was single engine circuits.
Wow.
Yeah, just to show that it could be done. Now, I wasn't in the plane for it, I was on the shore, but he also showed me, just with him on board, that he could take off with one engine off the water.
That's good.
Again, it's kind of showing off, but just showing that it does it. Yeah. The other interesting thing with this plane is most seaplanes, you've probably all seen, that term of getting on the step, and it's all like a speedboat where you're kind of plowing bum down and then you just get on top of the step and then it gets easier. This plane doesn't go through that transition. You go full power over a few seconds and it just, all of a sudden it's on the step. It just like without any kind of rotation, it just climbs, and it's just beautifully designed. And so at the Samara University, where it's built, they still have an aeronautical course, and they actually still study flying boat design. They've got a water tank test. They're actually experimenting with this, and they've come up with this incredible hull that just performs beautifully.
I have no doubt that they're very keen to hear a bit of feedback from you as well, from your trip and how the airplane handled, etc., etc.
Oh yeah, they've had lots of it, and they're still very supportive, helping out where they can. And in fact, the good news is another one's been bought for Australia. It's in a shipping container rather than flying it out. And a couple of the guys from the factory, including Dimitri. In fact, the two guys in the photo are coming over in a couple of months to assemble it, so I can't wait to play host.
No, I've probably been a bit busy here talking with Mike, but probably to open the floor for questions, and will Dave have it?
Thank you, thank you very much. Wonderful. Two questions. First, your first aircraft was American registered.
Yep.
The second one Australian registered.
Yep.
So why? And that's the first question. The second question is, do you still own the first aircraft?
So the American registration for the Sea Ray she was built in America. And at the time it was built, I actually was lucky to have a contract that saw me come to America once a month for work to Tennessee. So once it was delivered, I kept it on the American registry, got my American license, and was doing a lot of flying with it in America. And all of the stuff like the extra fuel tanks and getting all of that working, we sorted all of that out at the factory before I then put the plane in a container and shipped it to Australia. When the plane got to Australia, I started the paperwork to put it on the Australian registry. And then it kind of occurred to me, well, if I'm leaving the country, why would I put it on the Australian register? I might as well just leave it on the American registry and deal with it later. So that's what I did. Then when I got home, it took me a good year and a bit before I then put it on the Australian registry, and she's now on the Australian register.
Okay.
And her registration is Romeo Zulu Whiskey. What does that mean? Romeo Zulu Whiskey. Round the world. I couldn't get RTW. And I still currently own it, but very sadly, it was going, I had entered an agreement for it to go into a museum in Florida, which I was really excited about. It was going to be sort of the world headquarters of this Seaplane Pilots Association. We're going to put it in the middle of their new building but anyway, that all fell through. So I sold it to a very, very nice Qantas pilot. I won't say his name tonight, but he likes historic aircraft and he's going to keep it as a historic aircraft. And I'm really chuffed that he's getting it. It was never advertised for sale. It was arranged kind of privately for someone to work out who the right person was. Unfortunately, I'd love to keep it, but it's not good for the plane because if it's not flying, it's only degrading. And also, quite frankly, I need the money now. So, yeah.
Richard.
And then Phil after that.
Mike, the factory in Russia sounds rather special to me.
It is.
Are you dealing with the people over there in English, or do you have to go through an interpreter? And what is their background, this factory, and where is the factory actually?
Yeah, okay. So Samara is a town about 800 kilometers east of Moscow. So it's in pretty much the middle of the country on the Volga River. It's a really small factory. They only build 2 or 3 planes a year. And it's such a small production facility that in one part of the factory, they're laying up and doing fiberglass work. It actually feels a bit like a boat workshop. In one part, they're doing fiberglass work, and the other part, they're doing engines and avionics. They are all ex-military of some sort, and they're just everywhere in Russia. They actually, it seems like more people than they need, but I get the impression people in Russia aren't paid a lot of money, but they've got these incredibly talented people around. So, there's 2 or 3 engineers there the whole time. And whenever they're trying to work something out, the Sea Ray factory, I jokingly call the John Deere factory because it's so agricultural that if they're trying to work something out, they just go to the drill press and punch a hole in something and go, yep, that fits. Yep, right, call that the new part. But in Russia, they'd sit down on AutoCAD and create drawings and work it all 3D modeling and work it all out. And you just knew they were, proper engineers working on this in the right way. And the technicians were the same, but nearly all of them Russian speaking only. Dmitry, the owner, has very, very limited English, but you can get by over dinner. It's hard in the factory. But they have a young aeronautical engineer graduate who speaks perfect English. And because he speaks perfect English, he has become the de facto sort of sales guy and translator. So he looks after all of the foreign sales, he looks after their Facebook page and all of that. So even though he can design airplanes, English has become his greatest skill. But they're just wonderful people. I learned this on my first trip. I learned it doubly on this one. Pertinent today, given what's in the news. No matter what's in the news, people on the ground, wherever you go in the world, are all just fantastic people trying to get on with their lives and make a living. And hopefully, leave the world better for their own kids. So,
Do they like Putin?
sorry,
Do they like Putin?
they love him.
Do they?
Yeah, and that's the thing. And it's really good to. I'm so glad I've seen that on the ground. They love Putin. So any suggestion by people that they're scared of him or anything else, he's a strong man. He's a good man. Because then I found out because I made a couple of jokes thinking that they must think he's a bit funny, but no. They really like him. And quite frankly, I think these guys miss, they're being entrepreneurial, but I think they probably miss the days when they could go to work and not worry about money and everything just arrived. And, on one of the trips while I was there, some Americans came over very excited about my plane, got taken for flying it. And they were saying to Dmitry, if we took this plane to Oshkosh and put it on display, we could sell 12 planes at one show. And you know what? They're probably right. They probably could. Guys, scratch out a check just because it looks so cool. And he said, but can you gear up for 12 planes, blah, 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 blah. And I think all the money, right, all the promises in the world. You can just hear it, can't you? And Dmitry said to me at dinner that night, but Michael, I don't want to be busy. In summer, I go to the river. In winter, I go hunting. I don't want to be busy. Maybe 4 planes a year would be good, but not 12. And I thought, isn't that just wonderful? Like he has that little bit of entrepreneurial spirit, but he also knows that life's there to be lived. And, this guy's got a little, everyone in town's got little shacks down on the Volga River, built on the sand, the islands and whatever. They have a great life. They cross-country ski to work in winter, and they take the sea bears out and go hunting and put the animals in the back. I mean, they got it made. Bill.
Michael, thanks very much for a fantastic presentation. Thanks very much.
No, it's a pleasure.
My question is a minor one, but it goes back to your list of characteristics of your leader.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, how you actually sleep in the airplane?
And the new one?
Yeah.
We've slept in it 3 or 4 times so far. Interestingly, the first night I left London, I landed in Nice. I got away quite late because I had a flat tire. So I think I landed about half an hour before dark. And I went in, I got something to eat out of the vending machine. I went back to the plane, I had a sleeping bag in the back and I went to sleep. But the beauty of that is at 5 a.m. when the sun came out, I started the engines and left. I mean, it was magnificent. So, but I think on the way home, I don't think I was able to because I was at airports. I think, no, one other place, I don't remember where, but I've done it in Australia a few times. I mean, flying to Darwin, it's fantastic. You just fly until, you just keep looking, okay, I'm going to make that airport. No flight plan. I'm going to make that. Right. That looks like it'll be the last airport I can get to before the sun goes down. I'll land there and you just sleep in the plane again so that when the sun comes up, you get going, which saves all the rigmarole of ringing around to find there is no taxi. And that there isn't a hotel, or there is a hotel, but it's blah, blah, blah. So,
but you have to have your espresso first.
Yeah, but you get up in the morning, you have an espresso because that causes a reaction that means you don't need to worry about the toilet for the rest of the day and all of that stuff. Yeah, carefully planned.
Got a great question here, Mike, from Fredo.
Group captain, yes.
Yes. No, yeah. Any concerns over the tailplane being in the disturbed airflow of the wings in steeper ascent, or does the engine sitting above the wing and directly ahead of the tailplane come into the fore?
I think the latter. I have had no issue with turbulence. In fact, the plane just tracks beautifully. Now, I've only flown a few planes, to be fair, but this thing just tracks so wonderfully cross country. You know, you don't need your feet. It's wonderful, and it really helps. And I think that's what makes the single engine performance also docile, because the engines are really close together. Like the Catalina, they're very close together. They're up high. They're going straight over that tailplane, but also I think straight over the rudders. So in single engine performance, you know, yes, you need rudder, but it's well within the capabilities of it to cope, and that's really well. So, you know, they tell me, I mean, at first I thought the V-tail was all about being able to walk off on the beach because, you know, that seemed pretty appealing. But of course, the thing they explained to me was the big advantage of it is that seaplanes all want a weathercock. If you look at a Catalina, or, you know, if you look at a lot of Cessnas on flights, they actually add bits of stabilizer to give them more stability. But there's a payoff with that, is that when you get a crosswind, you've got more surface area trying to turn the plane around. So the beauty of the V-tail is that you get your directional stability with a much, much shorter tail. And so this thing can land in 20-knot crosswinds without an issue. It is so lovely to come down, you know, crab, and right at the last minute, she just kicks around beautifully. And like a boat, I play with the power of it, and in you come on, and it's magnificent. So yeah, that's a sort of a really good bonus for it. Good question.
How does it handle on the water?
Beautifully. It's you know, it's only slightly wider than a Sea Ray and 3 meters longer. So it's this long, slender hull. The step is actually only about 3 inches high. So the transition is very, very smooth, and it tracks beautifully. And look, I mean, having the twin engines, being able to just play with the revs on the water to turn is great.
Has it got a water rudder?
No, it doesn't need one.
Oh, really?
A lot of twins don't bother with a water rudder.
Yeah, because you got differential. No, I understand. But
Yeah, and again, this thing with the lower tail.
Always had trouble because it was so close together. Oh, yeah.
Yes, that's true. In fact, the Cat, I didn't get them to do it on this, but I had it on the Sea Ray, where the Catalina, my grandfather told me one of the tricks they had with the Cat was they could put the wheels down individually. So, you know, I had it set up so you could just pull a breaker on a wheel and put one wheel down, and then it's like having a keel, and you can really turn around it. But even with both down, that's the trick. If you're having trouble turning, put the wheels down, and it's like that resistance under the water gives you something to turn around.
I find it intriguing that such a beautifully designed aeroplane has come from a fairly small organisation that only wants to build 2 or 4 planes a year.
Incredible.
How big is the organisation?
Tiny.
And yet there's a lot of...
The original design comes out of the university itself.
Yeah.
And if you look at an old plane, it's a bit boxier and a bit more, you know, this plane, quite frankly, just fell together. The L45 I originally ordered, and then we decided to make this stretch version of it. We didn't realise, I mean, it's beautiful. In the flesh, you just stand there and it's just so elegant, and just, you know, if something looks fast, it probably is. For a boat, it's fast. It's a plane, it's not, but it's right. And I've never seen a plane where women stop me at the airport and say, "That is beautiful." I mean, you know, to me, it's got the lines of a Panine, something drawn by Panine Farina. So, but I think it's partly by design and partly just by luck that, you know, they added a couple of feet to the middle of the hull and stretched out the mold and did a few things and lengthened the nose a bit, and it just came together. But it's a tiny little factory. But, you know, part of what was great about that small factory was, you know, the plane, they were fairly basic inside, and I wanted it to still be a boat, so it's all surfaces that you can wash down, but I wanted it to be more comfortable for these long flights. And so, you know, we came up with the idea of the little tables that sit just behind the pilot seat, so little tables and drink holders, and passengers in the back have actually got USBs and a light, reading light. There's the seats have got kangaroo leather on them. I took 15 kangaroo hides over with me, so that because it's beautiful, soft, supple leather, and I wanted it to be the flying kangaroo. I even took memory foam over with me. So the last layer of foam was the really good quality memory foam that we make here in Melbourne, rather than the typical boat foam that they would have over there. So they were so happy to work with me on those things. The dash is completely to my design. The poor guy, you know, we had AutoCAD drawings going back and forth from Russia for probably 2 months. You know, as I said, I just move it this bit, this little bit. But the ergonomics of that dash, I think, is magnificent. I'll tell you one little example of something you do an experimental plane. You just can't normally do. So one of the things, it's one of those things you only do once, but in the Sea Ray once, I had so many fuel bladders. The main tank was 100 litres, but I could put up to 300 litres of other fuel in the plane. And that got transferred into the main tank with a little pump. My big paranoia was if you left that transfer pump on for too long, the main fuel tank fills up and then it just blows out the breather. And I did do this one day. Not for too long, but you know, I can smell the petrol swirling around in the air. And so because the wings were outboard, I thought I don't want to do this. And so I pitched them an idea and they accepted it. And I wanted to be the best quality one I got. So remember the old ovens that had the timers in them? And at the end it went ding and it turned off.
Yeah.
So I got one of those out of a German oven because I figured that would be the best you could get. And that's in the dash. And so the wiring for the ferry tanks is wired into the dash. So there's a left and right switch and this dial's underneath. And so when it's in the 0 position, there's no power, but you dial it around for how long you want, click on your ferry tanks. And so if I turn it to 20 minutes, I forgot what the calculation is right this second, but you know, that's how much fuel you're going to put in. And, you know, that just meant I never had to worry about overfilling it. And they were so happy to work with me on that and design a little space to make all that work. Some of the stuff I asked them to do, I know it was time consuming, but it really paid off for that sort of thing. So in the back seat, there's a little hatch above the roof where you open the hatch. And there's a little nipple, which is actually the fuel nipple that a Honda outboard motor uses. And so the fuel bladder in the back, the hose connects straight into that fitting and pushes it straight into the wing. And just next to the USB outlet is a 12-volt outlet that you plug in the power for the pump, and then you switch it on the dash. So the trouble that we put into that means there's never a wire, you know, draped across or taped in the back of the cockpit, and all of the dodgy stuff Dave will have seen ferry pilots doing. It's just beautifully there, and you know, I really like putting the time into that stuff, and none of it was ever an issue. So,
I've got a question. So Michael, 32 hours you said, of duration on this little thing?
yeah, look, I hope so. I need to test it. You know, look, I was hoping, I had all these things planned for the last 2 years. I haven't done any of the fun things, but I will do some testing. But calculations are it should be able to do 32 hours endurance, which will let me, I think I've told Phil, so I really want to retrace the double sunrise flight. I want to go up to Ceylon and Sri Lanka and fly back.
Excellent, excellent.
Now, I don't know if I tell you that's what I want to do. I might find, you know, I'll do testing over the outback in Australia and I might find, you know what, it's 28 hours and I can't do it. Or it's 28 hours and I'm going to have to wait for a 50-knot tailwind. I don't know. But that's what I'm aiming for. But there's lots of other fun things to do. But at least with the long range that it does have, I want to take my grandfather's logbook and go and retrace some of his trips.
You say testing, are you talking about the aeroplane or yourself?
Both, absolutely, absolutely both. Yeah, it's definitely both. I know staying awake for 32 hours is a lot. So, you know, initial testing, I don't obviously have to stay airborne for 32 hours. I can land at night, get up the next morning and go and test it again. But to test it really well, I will do, I'll do an overland. I might like to Perth, just follow the coast and keep going until I run out of fuel. But yeah, I'll do it overland for that testing. But the reason I'll do Sri Lanka back is that, you know, the last third of the flight will be over the Western Australian coastline. So if something is going up, you know, there's some options. But, yeah.
Last one for Ken. Dave, one more for back there. Two more.
I've got two, but so the person with the microphone first.
Yeah.
Mike, we had my first air show in Victoria for 3 years. Like a weekend.
Oh, yeah.
Would you make a flight from there?
Labor Day weekend.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. What air show is it?
Oh, yeah, very sure.
It's this year. Isn't it next year?
No.
Oh, it's back on.
Yeah.
Oh, I heard it wasn't
It's
going to
on- It's
happen.
on the wrong weekend. It's a long weekend. Normally held about this time of year. It's on the 13th of March.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So
Oh, they've usually reached out by now to tell me. So, yeah, no, I'll definitely come down for that. You can only go to the Flying Cafe and get a coffee. It's a great thing. Well done, everyone at Tyab. Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for telling me. I'd actually heard it was going to be postponed, so I didn't know it was happening. That's what I thought. Yeah, because they said they're going to put it off, and instead they're going to do another short field competition. Yeah, I thought they had two,
so
unfortunately.
they've changed the date. It's gone on a long weekend.
I'll make a call and find out. And one down the back. Oh, sorry, was there another question?
No, that was there.
Last one.
Yeah, just back on the subject of staying awake, did you ever have any on your long flights trouble getting drowsy?
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's why I'm a little bit nervous. So I never had I had a couple of very late night flights. I had an overnight flight very early on over Saudi Arabia, and I was fine. But that flight I did from the Aleutians down to Japan, where I was in the plane for 19 hours after I'd already flown for 6 hours that day and been up half the night worrying about it. Middle of the night, I just call it the Hume Highway nods. For the life of me, I couldn't stay awake. But I didn't have an autopilot. I was at 1,500 feet because of the icing level. I really didn't have a choice but to stay awake. But I did nod off many, many times. And I had the window open, splashing my water with face. I didn't have a way of making coffee. I should have thought to I had a thermos. I should have made myself a whole bunch of shots of coffee to have in the plane, but I just didn't think of it. And I had food to eat. But yeah, and I would never take anything artificial. I would never take speed or any of the amphetamine stuff that truck drivers do.
No dose.
No dose. I should have thought of that as well. Yeah. Yeah, that really scared me. And so the thing I have to decide is whether I do this solo or with someone else. And to be honest, there's no reason to do it solo. There's no record to be set. It's not, the longest solo flight, blah, 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 who cares? So, but weight will be at an absolute premium. So if I am going to do it, I'll definitely lose my COVID kilos, but I'd probably take, even if, I'd love to hear what you think about this. I thought even if they weren't twin endorsed, I'd love to just have a passenger with me who, if I needed to have a little sleep, could just keep an eye on things and wake me up if there's an issue. Yeah, but I was going to say that the reason I'd say they wouldn't have to be, if it wasn't illegal, that they didn't have to be twin endorsed, because I'd be looking for something like the 16-year-old 45-kilo pilot. Because weight, sorry, Phil. No, because weight, I will be overweight. I will definitely be overweight for this trip. So there's a lot of Russian female pilots that are about 38 kilos. But I value my marriage. But I'm sure I could find, down at Tyab, you've got so many great young kids learning to fly down there. I'm sure I could find someone who'd be happy to come.
Guys, we're coming to a close for the
Oh, it's 9:30. I'm so sorry.
9:30. When the pubs had 6 o'clock closing, it's 6 o'clock still. So
Yeah.
maybe they're happening at 9 too.
Yeah.
Mike, thank you very much for being a guest speaker tonight, and you've enlightened us on the seabear and the trip, and fantastic flight.
Thank you.
And you're also a very great speaker as well. So thank you.
I love you,
A
Jan.
little bit of practice.
Hey, that's my first talk in a long, long time. So I'm sorry if that's part of the reason I don't have time.
No.
I lost track. So
Very good.
Here tonight, and lady as well, of course. Coffee, tea if you wish, and just a general chat. I'm looking the other way, but there's probably still get your masks on. I have for a while yet. I haven't got mine on.
unless you're drinking water.
Or you're drinking something else. I'm still not sure whether Mike is building up something he can put into the tank, and maybe to do the oxygen rating, but we'll find it.
Funnily enough, that's actually
Okay, Mike, come over to the feedback and, the ministry. And. See
Say bye, everyone.
you.
Stay home. Thank you.
Dave, stopping recording. Stopping recording. What should we tell them?
Yeah.
Okay. So you've got to do the right trick. So stop recording. It'd be nice to say bye-bye to everyone, wouldn't it? Stop. Yeah, stop recording first.